Zealotry has a bad name. It's acceptable to be zealous about a hobby or to approach the new day with zeal. But to call someone a zealot? That's a bit insulting. Maybe it's because we have so many bad examples of zealotry. But in Scripture, we find there's a good zealotry and a bad zealotry. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan with a reflection on life and liberty. Are we zealous for what's true and right, or are we zealous for the things of this world? The great theologian R.C. Sproul once wrote, quote, "Zeal without knowledge has wreaked incalculable havoc through history," end quote. While we can appreciate the desire for independence from Rome that drove the Jewish zealots of the 1st century A.D., their zealotry was ultimately the bad kind. Yes, they were zealous for freedom from Rome, but they were pretty hazy about what they wanted to do with that freedom. Perhaps they had had a plan when their movement begun, but after a while, they became zealous for being zealous. Killing Romans simply became something they did. Eventually, the Zealots separated themselves from their fellow, if less zealous, Jews, and their cause culminated in a mass suicide in 73 A.D. at Masada. In a bit of bitter irony, their zeal effectively ended the Jewish bid for independence. As it turns out, Jesus appealed to some of the earliest zealots. A number of his disciples and followers appear to have been of the zealot persuasion. Some scholars believe Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus, was a zealot consumed with the desire for a military or political coup. And of course, one of the disciples was referred to as Simon the Zealot, not to be confused with Simon Peter, known as the Rock, who was himself susceptible to zealous impulses. Jesus directed their zeal and gave it an eternal purpose. He shaped it from a blunt and sometimes reckless instrument into a refined force for serving God and others. In our fandom culture of the 21st century, it becomes easy to misdirect our zeal. Indeed, we get rewarded for it. By being zealous for movies, celebrities, and politicians, we can generate clicks and likes and followers in the never-ending quest for social prominence and another dopamine hit. The more zealous we are, the more attention we gather to ourselves. And that's the key. Isaiah 59:17 reads, "He put on righteousness as a breastplate, and the helmet of salvation on his head. He put on garments of vengeance for clothing, and wrapped himself in zeal as a cloak." In Paul's letter to the Romans, he listed the hallmarks of Christian life. He wrote, "Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord." What makes zeal good or bad isn't the zealotry itself, but rather its object. Is it ourselves or is it God? The whole of Scripture makes it clear that we have a duty to be zealous for the things of the Lord. Our zeal must not be for the applause of those around us, but rather in service to Him, His purposes, and His people. The Reflections podcast is presented by Texas Scorecard. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan. Thanks for listening.